Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Sapphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts, USA.
And I'm Camille Barron, a healthcare advisor and financial coordinator, also in Sharon, Massachusetts, New England, USA.
And this is part two.
This is part two of our guest, Emily Smith Lee, where she is going to continue speaking with us about employment law and some of the changes recently in employment law. The last time she was on, part one, we talked about non-compete agreements, and we talked a little bit about family leave.
Yeah,
And
paid parental
paid
leave.
parental leave.
We're going to go on with
We're going to
that.
continue with that, and then also talk about equal pay laws, which
yeah.
is very important today.
That's a biggie.
It's very
That's
big.
a biggie. She's also very well qualified to talk about this, as she's experienced, specialized in employment law.
Yes.
All right. Hello.
Welcome
Hello.
back.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Be here.
last time we spoke, when you were on, we talked a little bit, we started talking about family leave. Previous to that, we were talking quite a bit about the non-compete. And for any viewers who haven't seen the episode, part one, please feel free to, it may be that the studio that you are in, if you're not in Sharon, maybe they can play these back to back if they so choose, but you certainly can have access to part one and just review some of the things that we talked
Also,
about.
what we do with the shows is we upload them to YouTube, and another one called archive.org, archive.org, which can be seen anywhere in the world, and then depending upon your local cable station, has other ways. There's one that's just for them, Telview. So you should be able to see her, us, or your favorite show, really anytime.
Any show and any time.
Yes.
Yes. So Emily, can you just kind of review a little bit what you had told us in part one about the paid leave?
Sure.
And then we can continue discussing that.
Absolutely. So, for a long, long time, there has been a federal protection for people who are dealing with illness, family member illness, new child, etc. That gives you 12 weeks of job-protected leave. There's a lot of people who missed out on that protection because it only applies to businesses with 50 or more employees, and you have to work for the better part of a year to be eligible. So the recent change in Massachusetts is a state leave policy. Applies to smaller employers. It's either 23 or 26, and it will be paid. The federal FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, is unpaid leave. The Massachusetts model, it's going to roll out over the next couple of years, is going to have a fund kind of like Unemployment Works to give people some benefits.
Is that the full pay or a
I
percentage?
don't think it's a full pay. I do not think it's full pay. And some of the details are not, they're just starting to set up this fund. But it's new, and it picks up a whole category of people who didn't have that protection. Something that will
for
still
men
be
too. This is for men too.
for men
Okay.
as fathers. I don't know whether they would have to show that there's some caregiving that they're doing during that period.
Oh,
That's a good question, though. But it is available for adoption of a child.
oh.
So, you don't actually have to be giving birth to get
Good.
some leave time.
You know,
We-
adopted. I gotta just, as usual, I interrupt. Adopted children, I call them the chosen ones
Yes.
because people really want them.
Absolutely.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So last time we were talking a little before we closed about some of the questions you guys had about, do you have to keep the job open?
All right.
What happens if you have a new employee? So there's a lot of, whether it's the old law or the new law, there's a lot of ground to navigate for an employer when somebody comes back from a medical leave, including that you may have hired somebody to do that job, and including that if they were out for their own illness, there may be lasting side effects. There may be a need for the employer to get medical clearance that it's okay and it's safe for them to come back to work. So those are a lot of rules that people don't know a lot about.
I have
that are
another
important to cover.
question. It seems every sentence you say, I think there's something else there. But you said that they have to, do they have to get a doctor's letter if it's not in the company's rules? Like, I want to come back to work, I'm fine. Well, where's your doctor's letter? I don't need a doctor's letter.
So under the FMLA, there's some pretty specific procedures. And the employer's entitled to know why you're taking the leave at the front end, and it's entitled to medical documentation at the front end. And yes, they can ask for a clearance to come back to work. They don't have to if they don't want to. You know, the employee can come back as long as it's within the 12 weeks and return to work. But a
if
lot
they-
of jobs that involve like lifting or you know, the employer's got a good reason to want to be sure you're not going to then injure yourself on the job.
So what happens, the person comes back to work, they say, I'm fine, I want to start working today. Where's your doctor's letter? I don't have one. Well, you can't come back to work without it. Do you have to pay them for that day? Do you have to let them come back? And you don't have to let them come, do they?
I
get
mean,
paid
if they
for that
come
day?
in and they go to their desk and they sit there and they check their email and they make phone calls and suddenly it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you say,
yeah.
where's your doctor's note? Yes, of course you have to pay them for that day because
Yeah.
they're there working. If they come in and meet with human resources at 9 o'clock in the morning and this conversation takes 5 minutes, probably not.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So one concern for employers is, are they really better? Because if you are compromised and you injure yourself at work, suddenly you're in a workers' compensation situation, even if your original medical condition had nothing to do with work. But the other thing that's tough for employees and for employers is sometimes you're not 100% better, but you're ready to come back to work. So a lot of companies think to themselves, well, if I don't have to do FMLA because I've only got 15 employees. Their employee comes back, they're still having some issues. Everybody is subject to the disability discrimination laws. And so you've got to be careful if somebody comes back and they're not at 100%, that you're doing your part to reasonably accommodate any needs that they have to help them transition back into the workplace.
What if somebody's out, I'm sorry, what if somebody's out with pneumonia? Or a cold that they're going
Yeah.
to give to everybody else, and they don't. Someone in our audience has got a cold or something that doesn't go away, and they come back and they go, well, I'm fine. Well, no, you're not fine. You can't come here. What do you do with that?
So
they
that's not
didn't
really
go
a-
to the doctors. They didn't
Yeah.
do nothing.
That's not really a disability, so you're not
Oh.
going to get in trouble by saying, no, you can't be sneezing all over my office and all over our customers. A disability that kicks in the disability discrimination rules is something that really affects your activities of daily living. It doesn't have to be permanent, but it's not something transitory like an infection.
Oh,
Well, what my question was going to be is the FMLA, that is not necessarily for an employee who has a medical issue, correct? Because that would fall under disability, wouldn't it?
So it's both. The FMLA is your protected leave time.
I see.
So if you're getting medical you go in for surgery.
that's for a baby too.
Or you have a
Okay,
baby,
yeah.
or your spouse goes in for surgery and you've got to take care of him or her. That's what protects your time off of
Okay.
work. So the disability laws protect people kind of treating you differently when you come back because they think you're still not 100%.
Okay.
Both sets of rules also, and this is tough for the for employers, to your point, Roberta, from last time, that they may have figured out how to fill this position. Not only do you have to let people come back, you can't retaliate against them for having taken the leave.
Oh, that's too bad. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Remind me not to go work for you, Roberta.
No, I would never do that. There are people that do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't help themselves.
Well, and it's not always malintent. It can be really inconvenient to have a key person
Sure.
out for 12 weeks.
Yes.
And, without sort of knowing what the rules of the road are, there are employers who are annoyed by that. And somewhere in their minds feel like that person didn't demonstrate commitment to the company or whatever they're looking for. You just have to be super careful about it because you can't punish people for taking that protected time.
Yes. And again, that FMLA it can also cover situations where they're caring for a family member,
Correct.
which of course is not disability themselves.
Correct.
That's
Oh, it
good.
covers that too?
Yep. Right, typically a spouse, child, parents, but that's all in the soup.
Yes, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So are we ready? We're ready to go on to our next topic, but that topic really, it'll be interesting to see what the offshoots of that are in the future.
Well, and I just one more quick comment on that topic. You know, we are in the sandwich generation
Yes.
territory, right? There's a lot of people who have young children and elderly parents who are relying on them. So,
Yes.
Oh,
you know,
sandwich generation.
yeah.
I was thinking it was them making the sandwiches at Subway again.
sorry, I'll try to think of a
forgot
sandwich
about-
thing for the equal pay part too.
That's like why do grandparents and grandchildren get along so well? They have a common enemy. You call it a sandwich.
Exactly.
Oh, isn't that interesting? I've never heard it called that.
Okay.
Boy, I'm missing out.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people who
Oh,
are in
yes.
the workforce in their
Oh,
you know,
sure.
40s and 50s who are fighting this on both ends.
Yes.
So that 12 weeks seems like a lot of time, but it can go.
It can go
Yeah.
fast, yes.
Oh,
You're right.
boy. Yeah.
Now, our third topic
Yeah, I'm
has
still
to
mulling
do with
on this.
compensation
Yes.
and
Yes.
getting to a level of more equality
Yes.
compensation.
So there has always, not always, but for a long time, you're catching a theme here. This is true in all these topics. For a long time, there's been protection for equal pay between men and women in the workplace. There's a federal law. There's been a state counterpart for many, many years. The recent changes have done a couple of kind of interesting things. You no longer are allowed to ask a candidate what they made at their prior job. And the thinking being, you know, the wage gap between men and women follows you around from
You
job
can't
to
ask
job.
how old they are, can you?
I mean, you can, but you're setting yourself up for an age discrimination problem if you decide not to hire
Yeah,
them.
we can always,
But-
you can ask, when did you graduate high school?
Yeah.
So that, so that you can figure it out then.
Yeah.
Unless they're dummies.
Right. But you know, it's interesting. It's an interesting challenge for employers because you know you may be asking that question not to perpetuate a wage gap, but because you're trying to figure out how much you want to offer, and
Yeah.
you're kind of going in blind a little bit. But
Yeah.
you know, the intent is just because you were as a female underpaid relative to your male counterparts at your first job, that's not going to set your fate for the rest of your career.
Okay.
The other change that has been made is to broaden the idea of comparable work. So for years, equal pay for equal work, unless it's a really clear-cut case, you're going to spend a lot of time arguing about, well, he's different in these 5 ways in his job than the female job. And that's still probably going to be true. But here, you know, we've broadened it to be comparable and made it clear that you really are supposed to be looking at the skills and qualifications, not whether they do the exact same thing all day long. So it'll be interesting. I mean, some studies have shown that this gap is real and that when you look at across industries, across companies, there are significant discrepancies. What's fascinating to me is that I don't see that many, we don't get that many calls on this.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think it's, well, and this is related to another change. It may be because people don't discuss their pay with each other. And the other thing that this law has said is you can't stop your employees from sharing notes on their paychecks.
From sharing notes?
Yeah, from asking each other, how much are you making? What's your base? What's your bonus?
And up until now, has that been the case where they couldn't, the employer could stop people from discussing their salaries?
I believe so.
Really?
Really?
I mean, you can't really stop people
Yeah,
from
how do you-
discussing,
yeah.
but you can have a policy that says don't do this, and you can discourage it heavily, and you can.
We had a girl who used to open up other people's paychecks. And,
Really?
yeah, and the super. This is years ago. I mean, they got new problems now. But and she says, "Oh, she wants more money. So and so wants more money." I says, "What?" Yeah, she saw that so and so was making more than her. I says, "Well, why don't you tell her what the other one does is deal with different things than she does, and that she's lucky she doesn't get fired for opening up the other one's check, because we knew that she had opened it up."
Yeah. You're not supposed to do that.
No,
Open
no,
up other people's paychecks.
No
Yes.
kidding.
But I mean, look, it doesn't mean you can't differentiate between your staff. You know, if I negotiate a salary for one lawyer and a different one for the other, you can do that. You can value different jobs differently.
Sure.
Sometimes it's about what you need to do to get the person in the chair that you need. But you just want to be careful that you're not either consciously or unintentionally always striking better deals with your male employees than your female employees, and you run some risk if you don't treat it very carefully. That
Now, here's another related topic. It could be a contributing factor, but we hear an awful lot about how women are less likely to negotiate effectively.
yes,
And I wonder if some of this has been caused by maybe a male employee or someone to be hired as someone as a candidate negotiates more successfully for a higher salary, and then a woman doesn't do that. Is that something that you think is kind of important as a
Absolutely.
way to also prevent this from happening?
I mean, I think it's a great question. It's a great point. There's only so much of this. If you consider this a problem, if you consider it a problem that there's disparity, there's only so much that the law can fix. Some of it is, as you described, sort of a cultural or sort of how you were brought up. There's also huge differences in leadership and mentorship in most companies and organizations. There's just fewer women at the very top, which doesn't give women negotiating their salary a lot of courage, but it also, you know, there are differences in opportunities for people to move up over the years. Not because anybody's trying to hold them down, but just because of what I call kind of the mentorship gap. And look, you can't pass a law and say that needs to stop, but it's out there.
It is,
Do
yes.
you think women have made much strides? I mean, 100 years ago, they couldn't even vote. When I graduated law school, there was like 2 women in the class. There were no women, very few women judges or clerks or things. And now it's like, you say, well, what are the question is what are the men doing now? Because they're all women, it seems, in the law. But it's true too with the doctors. There's more women doctors. So we've made a lot of strides. Do you think there's still more to go?
Oh, yeah.
You do.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the progression, I'll just do law. The graduation rate's about 50-50, you know, new classes of lawyers. So to your point, Roberta, very different
Just
from when you graduated.
50-50? I thought it was even
You know,
more.
maybe it tilts over,
the
comes
women.
back.
Yeah.
You know, people starting out entry-level jobs is also pretty equal. But then you look at in law firms who makes junior partner. And at least last time I was in the big law firm world, I've been out of that bubble for about 10 years, but about 25% of the junior level partners are women. You go up to the senior level partners, it's closer to 10%. So there's still a drop off.
Isn't
And I believe the same is true in many industries if you look at leadership.
I think part of the reason too is women themselves, because now if you were going to hire, I can't put you in that position, but I remember. I mean, in some ways it's better, some ways it's not. But I never really worked for a big firm, and maybe that was why I was more successful, you could say. But I remember saying to somebody, I think I settled the cases because women are crazy. You never know what they're going to do, so they just go, just give her whatever she wants, something like that. But I'm not sure. But when the women hire their employees, are they the ones hiring more men? are they the ones too giving the better jobs to the men? Is it a mindset from when you were little?
So
I mean, I'm not sure. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do, and I guess I would argue that the problem is not at the entry level hiring thing. I think the days of
Oh,
clearly
I see.
not favoring female candidates because of whatever. You're right; those are in the past. I think it's more subtle than that. That whether it's because you have to step back to raise children for a while, whether it's because the work-life demands are different, whether it's because there aren't enough mentors at the senior level, you just see this drop-off. It happens over the period of your career.
I never stopped raising children. They had a part of the qualifications of being in my house was knowing how to answer a phone and greet people. Otherwise, you couldn't be born into a household. But most women today do that. Maybe they don't.
They do.
They
Really varies. It
They
really
don't
varies.
stop working just because they have kids.
But I'll give you an example. I mean, yes, things have gotten better, but not too many years ago, we had a client who was hired at a law firm at salary X, and she had a law degree and an LLM, and a male attorney was hired who just had a law degree, no LLM, who was hired at $25,000 more than her.
Yeah, that's not fair.
You
Well,
know,
here's-
entry level before you have any reason to say, well, he's better at this or.
The other
That
thing that
happens.
happens in larger organizations is if you come in at a certain salary level, even if you have conversations with your manager about pay increase, they often have these thresholds where they
Oh,
can
yeah,
only give you
level
up to
this, level that.
5%.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in some cases, it almost
Fascinating.
sounds like they have to go to the extent of filing a suit.
You've got
Not
to be
to-
kidding on that.
Yeah, right? Isn't that the case? Because you
Yeah.
have these, only a certain percentage is allowed each year?
Yeah.
Well, too. Remember Stuart Hirsch was on here? He goes this. He said, what was it? Unconscious gender,
Bias.
unconscious bias,
Yeah.
gender bias there.
Mm-hmm.
That people are just they don't realize it, and they're pointing them out more, trying to make the companies aware of it.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, though. Next time I come back, I'm working on another book.
Ah,
Oh, nice.
Since we went down this side road here, the working title is Uneven Lanes, A Working Woman's Guide to Employment Laws.
oh, that's
So we
great.
uneven,
can,
uneven lanes.
Yeah.
Keeping the same theme.
Oh, the theme
Right.
of
Right.
the thing.
But this is
working-
specifically about women's issues in employment
that's
laws, so
great.
we can do a deep dive on
Say
this
the
stuff.
title of the book again. Uneven lanes.
Uneven Lanes, A Working Woman's Guide to Employment Laws.
Excellent.
Oh boy, that's good.
Good.
Great title too.
It is.
Now I just have
Yeah.
to finish it.
Well, I got plenty of material if you need some actual case material
Excellent.
to talk about.
I remember when I graduated law school, and I had a good job all through law school. I was like practicing beforehand, and this lawyer says, "Oh, now that you passed the bar, so good you've got to be kidding," is what I said to him. He says, "How about they call them legal secretaries then," and I said, "You've got to be kidding! You think I went to law school to be a legal secretary? I had that years ago. Sorry." But I mean, that was interesting. I remember he couldn't afford a lawyer. But I remember my husband, who's also a lawyer, he got out. They didn't pay that much then. He got $50 a week, and that included covering his expenses, which was auto and this and and working 100 hours a week. But
You're going to be kidding. $50?
yeah, he
Really?
got 50. Yeah, the average was they were going from 35 to 60. But I mean, they didn't pay. But what they did was that way they learn. So I told him, I said, if you're gonna starve, you might as well starve and be on your own. And that's when we started Sapphire and Sapphire.
That's a good way to
Isn't
start
it?
a business, and for a good
Yeah,
reason.
what did you have?
I
What did you
agree.
have to lose? Nothing. I mean, but it was interesting too. Some of these the bigger the law firm, though, I think the bigger the headaches, I remember this firm that they got 100 or so. I remember when he called me up, he goes, Mrs. Sapphire, I got 28 employees now. I said, oh, that's wonderful. I'm happy for you. I hung up the phone. I go, 28 headaches. But I mean, that's interesting. But law is a good, I mean, if anybody, law is a good profession. It was good. And on the other hand, like insurance is good too. We passed the insurance broker's exam, and I never really understood it.
Yeah.
Couldn't figure it out. All the angles there. That's what we got Camille for. But anyway, that's a good. You got to be kidding. I want to point out again about the activity coloring books and what we do and.
Look at this. Police officers are our friend.
And is that the Braintree? No,
This
that's not
is-
the Braintree one.
Where is the Braintree one?
I don't know.
I
is
think
that
I
the
have the
Braintree?
Braintree one.
Yeah, look at the back cover on that one. All the back covers are different. This is a black and white back cover
Did they have a reason for making it black and white?
because it stands out more.
Oh, sure.
You know,
Yes.
ever go to a movie and they do part of the movie in black and white?
Yes.
It sets a stage.
Yes.
But that was really a book there. Everybody, they have a different cover. One of my favorites is, I don't know if we have it, is Bourne, Mass, where they have the Minions. I got a thing now for Minions. I think they're in.
Minions are it.
Minions are in. But anyway, that's it. Emily, thank you so much. You're very enlightening. Very, very enlightening all the time. And
you.
you're always a pleasure.
There are so many topics
It's
that we
always
could.
fun to be here.
We have others that we want you to come back for too.
Great.
I think it's great to be able to disseminate this kind of information because so many people don't know it. In fact, as you said, even some
Yeah.
employers may not know it.
Exactly.
So it's good to have that kind of a resource, and I'm definitely looking forward to
Ye-
your new
years
book.
Years ago, remember Michaela? She watched the show. She says, "Oh my God, that's my situation. I got to call her up."
Yeah.
It was funny.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you
Wind
again,
up.
You're
We're
Emily.
winding up
Thank you.
now.
Yes, thank you so much. And for our viewers, we thank you for watching this episode. This is part 2. You can also watch part 1. We want to hear from you if you have any questions or any suggestions about this topic or any other show. Because remember, this is your show. The law, your money,
And
you.
you.